Well, hello and good day to you, you saucy nuggets. Welcome in to Unhinged. This is a great place to be. And if you are on the West Coast, good morning. If you're on the East Coast, good midday. And if you're elsewhere in the world, I hope you are enjoying yourself. Today, I am Magic Nate. I am going to be the co-host today, along with the legend himself, Terry Kavanagh. How's it going, Terry?
Good, Nate. How about yourself?
Doing well, much better than last week. I was on the struggle bus last week with getting over being sick. Oh no, we lost a Terry. Where'd he go? Yeah, this is happening live, folks. I don't know what happened to Terry, but he'll pop back in. Uh, Meantime, welcome in to Unhinged. This is where Terry brings on people he knows in the industry, his friends, his cohorts, his confidants, and they talk about some of the craziest things that happen in the comic book industry and some of the shenanigans that happen behind the scenes. Today's guest is a acclaimed comic book creator. He is an artist and writer with credits such as American Flag, Star Wars, Hey Kids comics. Um, he's worked pretty much in every comic company for the past probably 40 years or so, including Marvel, DC, and Image. Uh, and he's still chugging along. So I want to bring to the stage Howard Chaykin. How's it going, Howard?
I'm good. It's by the way, that's 55 years, not 40 plus. Fuck that
Oh,
shit.
okay. Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry. 55
I'm
years.
old. I mean, my first credit is in 1971, and I was working in the industry for 3 years before that. I was an assistant to a number of bright lights. So yeah, I can't get the fuck away from this. I'm umbilically attached. It's inescapable.
It's just part of
Where
your
is
DNA
where
at
is
this point.
it's like where is Terry? What happened to Terry?
I don't know what happened to Terry, and I am going to find out as we go along. But would you like to introduce yourself to our audience, talk a little bit about what's going on in your life, and then we can
Um, my,
dive
my
into
name is
some.
Howard Chaykin. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, wait a minute. That's another program.
That's on
That's different.
Tuesdays.
What's that?
That's on
Say again?
Tuesdays.
Great. And let's see. I'm a veteran of the comic book business. As I said, my first credit was in 1971. I started out my career as an assistant to Gil Kane, went to work for Gray Morrow, Wallace Wood, Neil Adams. And I have worked for every company in the business with a couple of exceptions because I'm a whore and that's how it works. I'm a comic book man. I love the comic book medium. I'm not fond of the content, but I love the form. And I'm continuing to work because I don't play golf, I don't play tennis, and I don't fish. So I figure I might as well apply my skill set to getting up every morning. I mean, at this hour of the day, under normal circumstances, I'm at the desk behind me working. I just finished a major job, an educational piece, and I'm working on commissions this week. So, I'm just, I am not a happy-go-lucky comics man as Stan might have portrayed us in the old days, but I am a working stiff, a comic book man, and comics inoculated me when I was 4. So I'm 70 some odd years into a love-hate relationship with the comic book business.
I mean, that's cool. How did you get your start in the
As a
industry? Like,
as a professional or just as my foot in?
how about just your foot in? Like, let's start
Gil
there.
Kane, the word in those days, comic book fandom didn't. There's no internet. We were on a network of just bullshitting each other. And I heard through the network that Gil Kane's assistant had died suddenly in his sleep. So I called Gil. He was listening to the phone book. I asked him, I heard his guy died. Can you use somebody? So I went to work for him. And I'm convinced in retrospect, and my work was unusual. It was this terrible. I had no skill set whatsoever. But I'm convinced that Gil hired me because I was Jewish and he could be, Jewish at me. And we
Hello.
are the bog monster is here. uh,
I got
Hi,
a
Terry.
message that the host ended the meeting, and then my entire computer shut down.
Nice.
What?
So I'm on my phone now. I thought you had shut down my computer, Nate.
I blame society.
I'm not that
Um,
skilled.
yeah, So I mean, I basically worked my way up through the apprentice stuff and the assistant stuff, and Neil Adams bullied Murray Boltinoff into giving me my first job, for which I will remain forever grateful. I was not in any way equipped to do that job. My work just sucked. My work sucked for several years, but they needed to fill pages, so I got work. And it wasn't until I developed a respect for craft and a patience for the learning of craft that I actually felt that I began to do work of merit. And the experience of recognizing the fact that I had no natural gifts other than blind rage and hunger, and what I had was a capacity to learn. And I taught myself by dint of imitation, by swiping, by copying, by observation, by analysis. And I have no gut. I'm all head, no gut. But in the retrospect, I recognize and understand that gut dies and cerebral doesn't. And that one of the reasons why I continue to produce work of any value and merit is that I've never had a gut to depend on. The most talented member of my generation was Bernie Wrightson. When you come into a room and Bernie Wrightson is waiting for you, you realize you are never going to be anything more than second or third place. There's just no way. And in retrospect, Bernie dies broke because he wasn't smart enough to monetize his skill set, because he didn't understand that nothing is permanent, and that he was dependent on gut-based gifts, which deserted him after a series of jobs that took it out of him. And this most talented guy ends his career doing shitty animation design for shittier animation studios. And it's a sad story, but turkeys will stay out in the rain with their mouths open and wait for the rain to stop. I understood early on that whatever footprint I had commercially was brief and not infinite, and that I had to do something about my life. I didn't expect to live past 50 because I lived a potentially lethal lifestyle, and my life was informed by bitterness and rage and complaint, and ultimately I put myself in a position of ensuring that I was not going to be a drag on the system, because I grew up on welfare. I'm that anomaly in New York, a welfare Jew, and I know what poverty looks like, and I had no desire to live in poverty again. And I ended up making choices and career decisions that were specifically aimed at making certain that I would not be on the dole, that I would not be a client of the Hero Initiative. And I'm grateful that I made those decisions, because I'm surrounded by people who didn't.
Yeah, Howard, but it's not like you just followed the trends or anything like that. I mean, you were doing some of the first independent work out there for First Comics, etc.
Well, I had no commercial footprint, so I had nothing to lose. I wasn't, I did not take the route that most of my generation took, was to attach themselves to a super character who was either in decline or an ascension, and build a fan base out of that by spending a year, 2 years, 3 years producing that material and generating a base and a following. I came to understand very quickly when I became a working professional that I did not have the skills required by Marvel or DC to produce commercially acceptable super duper books. I didn't have it. I just didn't have the skill set. I don't draw an animated and anatomically correct figure. I don't have the big muscle head in my head. And it was imperative for me that I had to find something else to do that made sense, that was going to generate some attention. Flag never achieved any commercial footprint. I sold one copy for the others, for Watchmen, say, or Dark Knight, say, for their 100, one for me, 100 for them, because I mean, an indication of what that's about is that years ago, when first did their first panel and introduced us to the world as the team that was going to be producing First Comics, I was on this panel, and there was a bit of artwork available, and one of the questions from the audience was, "What are his powers?" And because I'm a contemptuous fuck, I said that he can remove his underwear without taking his pants off, and he makes ice cream. But that's a reflection and indication of why Flag did not become a commercial hit, because it does not have the tropes that appeal to the mainstream comic book fan or even to the mainstream comic book producer. I mean, one of the things, I'm going to digress like a motherfucker here, so just get ready for it. Terry, I've eaten with Terry enough, so he knows how digressive we can be. By the way, Terry, you going to Heroes this year?
I am. You?
No, I'm going to Raleigh instead. But go back to Haberdash and think of me.
Okay, fair enough. I will.
Good news. One of the things about comics that is true today is that in comics today, the writer is the alpha, and the reason for that is that the mainstream comic book companies are trying to avoid what happened to them in the 90s when Image broke out and created this entire art-based product. Art, I use that within quotes. But the other reason, there are a number of other reasons as well, not the least of which is that comic book writers, not all of them, but the majority of them, can transition through comic books into YA fiction, which is to say, badly written fiction for children who think they're adults, movies, television, and stuff like that. Whereas comic book writers, whether they know it or not, are operating in a trope-based medium, which has more in common with kabuki than mainstream theater. That it's all a series of trope-based gestures. I mean, there's when people talk about comic book inking, I came to understand that I was never going to be able to ink, and I use that word, and I don't do air quotes, but imagine them for me. In the sense that comic book inking is a series of strokes and gestures and tropes. This is how you do hair. This is how you delineate shape and form. This is how you indicate the turning of form. And I realized I had no skill for that at all. I just didn't know how to do it. I look at a crow quill now, and it's like, what is this thing? I don't know if I can. So I ended up having to figure out a way to create black and white line art that was reproducible and acceptable to some eyes. And that's what I did. And I'm proud that I had the energy and forethought to do that. I look at most comic book art and it's completely trope based. And so comic book artists are stuck. They can't get out. They have nowhere to go. When an art director wants to do a comic book style drawing, they don't hire a comic book artist to do it for the most part. They hire an illustrator to imitate his screened memory of what comic book art looks like. I mean, when people do reproductions of pulp art, frequently they hire bad guys to do bad artwork. It's because it reflects their poor memory of how good the work was. Years ago, in the mid 80s, Black Lizard Press started coming out with these reprints of paperbacks that had not seen print since the early 1950s. They had the worst, shittiest covers ever. I mean, to its credit, Hard Case Crime changed that shit. But these covers were affirmations of misremembering how shitty the work was. And I'm not talking about drawing. I'm talking about the various means by which, here's how hair is done. This is what women look like. This is what heroes look like. And they're stuck. It's not a real rocket science fellowship. I'm not a dumbass.
But they're often the people in charge are not artists, and they don't let the artists be artists. They're asking for those kind of tropes that you're talking about, that what they're used to from their childhood. To me, what stood out about American Flag way back when, going back to that, is that it was not like anything I had read before. So it went to the top of my pile every month when I bought comics. It was what I wanted to see what was happening.
You were alone in that.
I don't think so.
You were in the minority. I'm serious. The book is people when people think of Flag now, they think of nothing but sex. They don't think of the graphic design. They don't think of the fact of the use of page to specify time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we said before we started here. It's like Rob Liefeld's in his inability to draw feet, or Gil Kane's up nose shots. It's all the tropes that people remember. It's not the actual holistic experience. Because comic book readers tend to read through the scrim and sieve of a set of standards and bullet points. And
right.
Sorry?
No, I said right.
And one of the reasons why Dark Knight was so successful was that it made people feel comfortable with liking the shit they've been liking since they were 11.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the book is interesting in places, incoherent in a lot of them, with a number of really nice little bits and pieces. But overall, it gave an audience that might have been uncomfortable with still reading the same crap they read when they were children, that moment of comfort, that moment of solace. And I don't really care about this comfort of the audience. I mean, my job is to do stuff that interests me and hope that someone else is interested with me. And I'm frequently wrong.
Well, and I think if you make them uncomfortable, you're at least getting an emotional reaction of some sort, and that's what the aim should be. It doesn't always have to be positive.
Yeah, but I want to be loved as well. The fact of the matter is,
is Howard blipping just for me?
What's that?
I thought you froze or blipped, but it's probably...
No, that was you. That was you froze.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm used to it.
Look, if we accept the fact, as I do, that there are approximately 250,000 people in the entire United States buying all the comic books we make, at most, okay, I would say that no more than 35 or 40,000 of those readers have any idea have done anything professionally in comic books other than Star Wars.
Wow.
But true.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's probably true, yes.
Okay. Which demonstrates that we're dealing with an audience that is not interested in form but content. And years ago, after I gave my explanation to someone why I was charging them more for Star Wars comic book signatures than I was for the others, some wag, some clever Nelly said, "You're just like Harrison Ford." And I said, well, Harrison Ford was made a multimillionaire by this work. I was made an $1,800. Please go fuck off. The civilians out there think that comic book artists are making a fortune from all the trickle down money from the movies. It's true though. That's true.
Yes.
You must be a wash and dough from all those super duper movies. No. And
and you must be making it. You must be making a ton from the Star Wars movies.
Right. Sure. That's me. But one of the reasons I did what I did for a living, from 1990 to 2012 or 13, working in television on shows I'd never watched, was that I wouldn't have to be awash in the kind of bitterness that left that bad taste in my mouth from working in comics in the 1970s. Bear in mind, my self-deprecation is not in any way like self-loathing. I know when I'm good, and I'm really good at what I do. But what I do, and that I'm good at, is frequently of little or no consequence or interest to the audience of the comic book business, because they want characters who are. Look, the paradigm, the armature of American comics is based on the Mobius strip of the Roadrunner Coyote cartoons by Chuck Jones. It's a perpetual chase with no closure. And change in comics is defined by by adding or just subtracting the circle around Batman's logo, or putting Spider-Man in a black suit for a couple of years. Yeah. That's the concept. So that you're dealing with mostly corporate enterprise material, which cannot be allowed to change. I mean, I got turned on to Lee Child's Jack Reacher with the first novel when the week it came out, by a woman who ran a crime bookstore. She said, "This is for you," and I loved it. And I realized I'd read all the books. I stopped reading a couple of years ago when his brother was a ghost in them. And I came to understand that the appeal to them was exactly like the comic book appeal, that nothing really changes. He's the same character every time. And years ago, I went to a crime writers enclave in the Midwest in Wisconsin. And it was interesting to be a junior at this. I mean, I go to conventions these days. I'm an emeritus. I'm a legendary figure of age. Here I was, just some fucking punk. These guys had no idea who I was. And to a man, all these crime readers and crime writers regarded Lee Child as the archetypal hack, and which I found fascinating. I did. And comic book is a hack business, because you've got. I mean, I am in awe of anyone who could pick up the job of writing the Fantastic Four today, or Superman, or Spider-Man. Because for me, the only way I could approach that work is to derail everything and start from scratch.
Well, and we were trained, at least at Marvel, to create the illusion of change as opposed to actual change. And right. As you're saying, sometimes it was as simple as changing the oval around Batman's bat symbol, but other times it was to pretend someone was getting married and then unmarry them or whatever. That's how we were trained. But I have a question for you. I have a question for you, Howard. Speaking about what the audience's expectations were and tropes, do you think now that we have less kids reading comics and more adults, there's more room for stuff outside the expected norm in comics?
No. I think what you've got is an audience of Arrested Development who have to have their continued interest in super duper comics supported and maintained by applying an ersatz gravity to the material. David Mazzucchelli has said that the more realistic you make a superhero, the sillier it becomes.
Yeah,
and that's true.
Absolutely.
And I was a completely obsessed with super comic book fan when I was a kid. I began to identify the value of the work that Julie Schwartz was doing at DC with the work that he was doing with Gil, with Carmine, with Joe, and Toth. And then when Marvel came along, I became a complete and total Marvel junkie. I was obsessed with the work. I loved it. I remember specifically doing a full court press on a fellow fan, because in those days we were all syndicalists. And Michael Abramowitz was like, the Marvel, they're awful. And what turned him around, what changed his mind, oddly, was an issue of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos of all things, with and I remember it specifically. Fury says to somebody, "What do you want me to do? Give you a kiss?" Michael thought this was absolutely on a par with Preston Sturges. This was just like, oh my God, I'm achieving Satori here, and he became a Marvel junkie like me. So, I just love the work. And by the time I became a working professional, however, I wasn't reading this stuff. I was a stoner. I was a drunk. And what I was reading was underground stuff. And I was reading sword and sorcery stuff and fantasy and science fiction. And then when I became a working professional, Archie Goodwin weaned me away from SF and fantasy into crime fiction, for which I'm forever grateful. And years later, when I read Jeffrey O'Brien, who remains one of my favorite living critics, O'Brien said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said that crime fiction is just as fantastical as science fiction and fantasy, but it is based on an observed reality. And that observed reality was something I rejected entirely as a child, became the modus operandi of my adult life. I really liked the idea of moving beyond the generic into the specific. Flag is very specifically designed to reflect my interest in industrial design of the 1930s and 40s, what was called machine art. All the architecture, all the vehicles, everything is designed to look like it could have existed in a world designed by McKnight Kauffer, Raymond Loewy, Russell Dorwin Teague, or what's his name, Norman Bel Geddes, and Times Square continues that with that magic realist feel, and then Black Kiss comes along. Black Kiss is the first major product that I developed, literally specifically living in California, and reflected my paranoia about California, because you grew up in New Orleans and New York. I mean, significantly, I find it fascinating the parts of New Orleans are now playing New York on television and movies.
Yeah.
California does not have anything like the street life that people have in New York City and New Orleans. People talk about getting mugged in New York City. I've never been mugged. I mean, all these people claim. I'm convinced that most of those muggers is drunk falling off curbs.
I was mugged at least 8 times in high school alone.
I got beaten up a lot, but never mugged. I mean, with this mouth, I'd beat me up too.
Well, I never had more than 75 cents on me, so it really wasn't worth it for them.
I guess. California informed me with an enormous paranoia. I mean, it felt like the sunshine was scary. I mean, when I started reading Joan Didion, and I said, it was like, what the fuck? This is really spooky. And Black Kiss reflected that paranoia and sensibility. But from that point on, each book I did reflected an attempt to create an observed reality, be it graphic or real. And that informs everything I've done. No generic stuff. I mean, it separated me dramatically from Gil Kane. I don't draw anything like Gil Kane, but Gil is a profound influence. I learned how to do my job watching him work for a year, and significantly, an assistant of mine who is now a colleague spent 6 months trying to explain to teach Gil how to work with reference, and it was a disaster because Gil could not slow down to accommodate the use of reference. So that Gil was, was always the generic guns, generic suit, generic shoes, generic buildings, cars, everything. There was nothing specific about it, and that it was just all that generic stuff.
He focused on the dynamism
yes.
of what he.
Well, I mean, I've always felt that Buscema was wildly overpraised, because I think his draftsmanship was really lovely, but I think that Gil was the guy who channeled the Kirby sensibility most effectively. Marvel, and Gil, of course, was profoundly easy to dislike. He was a difficult, complex, contradictory man who was guilty of everything he's been accused of. He was a thief, liar, and a cheat. Anybody who says otherwise is just hagiography bullshit. That said, despite all that criminal behavior, I learned a great deal watching him work. I spent much of my childhood terrified that I ended up like Wallace Wood, as opposed to Gil Kane.
So Howard, do you think doing Hey Kids Comics has given you an opportunity to get some of this off your chest publicly?
Not really. I mean, that and anecdotally, when I first when I first announced the project, I set up a website, an email address, so that people could send me anecdotes. And some wag on Facebook presumed that I was going to be doing nothing but settling scores. And I my first unfriending and blocking, because that was not my intention. I wanted to be as neutral as possible. I wanted to basically tell the story. I mean, comic book storytelling tends to have, it's twist endings, and it's not it. And I wanted to do an anecdotal narrative with a point of view, certainly, but without a judgmental point of view. Okay, that state it. Take from this what you will. Anecdotally, again, when I checked that website, that email address, every fucking thing I heard from anybody, anonymously and with names, was a settling of scores.
Wow,
it was the antithesis of what I wanted to do.
I do think you succeeded at telling that story with your voice. It is not just a generic telling of the history of comics.
Right. Well, I mean, I think Stan did so much damage to us as a profession by creating this happy-go-lucky myth that served his own interests. that it infantilized and demeaned the work, and the work done by people who's were worthy of respect. And it's like, it's just comics. Well, it is just comics, but it's also every fucking day on my desk. And
yeah.
And I mean, I abjure nicknames. I don't need nicknames. My name is Howard. It's tough enough as it is. I don't need to be Howied. And the need to create this infantilized universe of happy-go-lucky guys just doing comics so they love it was just like, get the fuck out of here with this shit. I'm grateful for the work, but it remains work. And I love the work.
I will tell you from the standpoint of having worked on staff at Marvel, and we talk about this on this channel a lot, we were all just having the time of our lives. We were doing something we loved. It was work. There's no denying that, but it was work we were sort of happy to do. And that might be the difference between you sitting at your desk alone, because I had that experience as well. And as much as I enjoy the writing and editing, working from home, sitting at my desk, it's not the same as the energy that you fed off when you were all in the same place. And you've worked in studios before, and I'm sure shared that.
Yeah, but it was clear from your generation came in after mine, and it was clear to me that you guys were committed to hijinks, which were not my idea of a good time. There was a lot of our host section. There was a lot of henanigans going on there. A bunch of failed comedians making each other laugh. And the legacy of that, of course, is the current David Wayne School of Comedy, where you have comedians and comic actors clearly having a much better time working than the audience was watching. I would come into the office to see you guys acting up. It's like, get the fuck out of here with this. Come on down. Get back to your cubicle. Marvel now, of course, is a boiler room. It's outright. It's outrageously boiler room.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I can't wait to get out of that office when I'm visiting. It's like people cram three or four in a room, no privacy, no sense of moral self. A
lot of our morale boosting was encouraged by Mark Grunwald, and he liked to get us all. He thought that if he could get our creative juices flowing in our personal relationships with people and what we were doing, that it would also work in comics. And I think there was something to that, to be perfectly honest.
I always thought he was like Uncle Wethby, like Tex Antoine's weatherman is with that Uncle Wethby with the hairs, I mean,
but speaking to those times, and in service to the Unhinged Stories title, I would like to tell a little story about my first interaction with Howard Chaykin. I thought you went away because I was telling this. I was in the Sentis assistant. I had basically just begun there. I had unofficially worked for Ralph Macchio, etc., and been submissions editor. This was my first really official position. Probably working with her maybe 1 or 2 weeks. We were doing Heroes for Hope. And at one point, Ann gave me a list of people to call and say that their work was a little late and could they get their pages in. Everybody was only doing 2 or 3 pages. It was a lot of different talents. And when I got to Howard, I was a little nervous because I knew about your reputation. And so I said, Ann, please don't make me do this. Please. No. And she's like, no, this is part of your job. You have to do this. So I called up Howard and I said, hello, Mr. Chaykin, this is Terry Kavanagh. And he's like, speak up. And I said, oh, hello, Mr. Chaykin, this is Terry Kavanagh. I'm Ann Nesenti's assistant. And it seems like maybe possibly, I think she said that you could maybe be a little late on your pages, to which Howard said something along the lines of, sucks for you, and hung up the phone. I almost cried. Ann was hysterically laughing. I definitely peed a little. Ann was hysterically laughing because that was her whole point in having me do that. She was trying to break me in fast to the industry.
By the way, none of this is true. None of this happened.
Sure.
This is a complete traumatic experience that Terry had with someone else, and he's projected me onto that experience.
Should we
I have a
say
list of
should
people.
we say Howard Mackey?
Howard
Maybe Howard
lies.
Mackey.
Mackey lies all the time. I mean, come on, man. Going to sympathy with brain surgery. What the fuck? Wear a hat. Come on, fucking Mac. The nice Howard. Get the way, please. No.
Anyway, that was
James,
my first experience with.
It says that's brutal. No, James, I never said any of those things. I did say the thing about Mackey and his brain surgery, though. That was me. You wouldn't hear.
Yeah, you can't deny that.
It's nice seeing all these people like tune in and sub K-pop. Like good seeing you and everybody tuning in. I like seeing the comments come in and just especially like James, damn Howard, that's brutal. You guys are on one.
I'm not the chillest of dudes, as the kids say. I'm the 36 hours that I've just experienced were the result of my own intransigence and difficulty. I own it. It was my fault. And I am notoriously difficult, not in the way that most comic book fans think, but rather in a take no prisoners sort of way. I take very seriously the work that I do, and I do everything I possibly can. I was about to say try, which is like, as Yoda always says, trying bullshit is. The reality is I have a firm and specific commitment to delivering what I promise when I promise it. I feel that Harlan did the world an enormous disservice with Repent Harlequin, said the TikTok man, because it justifies unprofessional behavior in the name of art. And unfortunately, we don't make art, we make craft. Comic books are not art, they are craft work, which in no way diminishes their value by any stretch of the imagination. Mainstream comic books are a craft product. And I've gotten myself into trouble with rabid fandom for saying such things. But there's a reason why they're rabid.
I would say, Howard,
I mean,
you are notoriously direct and don't suffer fools easily. Is that a fair?
Yeah, but fools is subjective. I mean, let's face it. There are people I think are idiots that are deified by the business. I mean, as I said, I was telling someone this morning. When I did the Divided States of Hysteria, there was a pitchfork committee that was coming after me, and one of the people who was leading that pitchfork came on to me about a year ago, and I thought it was a spoof. Looking for me become a Facebook friends, and my reaction was, there was no indication of apology, of acknowledgement of responsibility. And this person referred to our relationship as a rift. And I explained that for my money, a rift is when I get into a fight with Walter. That's about it. Going after my career to try to end my career is not a rift.
No.
And but again, and also, I work in a culture in which people are, we have to forgive yourself before you can forgive. No, you have to be worthy of forgiveness. Forgiving yourself lets yourself off the hook too fucking easily. That's sort of my attitude. And I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm situationally kind. I'm not particularly nice. I'm, Stan was really nice, and he ended up, wrecking the careers of Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. Yeah. He was really nice. He's a nice guy. Everybody says he's a nice guy. Yeah. Will Eisner was really nice, but he was a perjuring son of a bitch.
Wow.
You've seen the transcripts, right?
Oh yeah, I know.
And the rush to forgive him when those transcripts of the deposition came to light demonstrated to me just how fatuous and credulous the audience is.
Well, it's a desire to like the people whose talent you admire.
I'm a big fan of a lot of people who I despise. I don't need to like people to like their work.
Well, and I think that's an issue these days in general. Everybody's a lot of people's work is dismissed based on their politics or their personal attitude, which I don't think should reflect on their work at all.
Yeah, but because we live in a culture of purity tests and of a kind of a spiritual Stalinism that preclude. I mean, Justin Smith Rowe, who is a really intriguing figure in the letters. He's a Sacramento headbanger, carjacker, and thief who now teaches in Paris and writes fluently in English and French. Coined a phrase, Philistine pseudo-criticism, to define the way people now relate to work. And I resented it because it was so spot on and brilliant. It's the archetype of the difference between favored and best. I made an immoral commitment of late to never say that something is great. I'd rather say that this is among my favorites of work. I just, there's a lot of stuff I don't like, but for example, I spent last week in London, and I saw 4 shows in 3 days, and I saw the first show was just dreadful. The second was really interesting. The third was something I'd already seen twice already, so I knew what I was in for. And the fourth was an old chestnut that was just a perfect thing to end the week with. And
what were the shows?
I saw The Devil Wears Prada, which has the same problems as the musical version of Kinky Boots, which is that the score was written by a rock and roll performer, so that the entire fucking musical is one fucking anthem after another. It's endless. It's all I want. There was no. You compare it to, and the last show was a nicely mounted production of Oliver by Lionel Bard, and that's a show that there's so much nuance, there's so much adjustment to the material that and Elton John wrote The Devil Wears Prada. There's great material there. Howie, fuck you, James, Jimmy, Howie, get the fuck. But it's okay, Jimmy. We saw a show called The Fifth Step, which was a two-hander with Jack Loudon and Martin Freeman playing an alcoholic and his sponsor. That they may not have been in the program, but the people who wrote the material were clearly, they got it in every way, shape, and form. An astonishing two-hand piece of work. Cabaret, which I'd seen twice in the New York iteration. And
I know you're you.
And people hate this production. I know, because it's not the traditional show. And then we saw Oliver, and it was the theatrical fun week. I'm going to be in New York next month with my grandson. We're going to see Dead Outlaw, assuming it doesn't die because it didn't win anything in the Tonys. Death Becomes Her, which I saw in November and loved. It's the gayest show on Broadway right now. Book of Mormon, against my daughter's objections because she feels her son is too young to see it. And I just got a
great show.
I'm not a fan of South Park at all, as you know, but I loved Book of Mormon. I had to be dragged there kicking and screaming, and I just loved it. It's one of those rare shows where the second act is better than the first.
Yes.
Completely agree with that.
Wait, so you're going to be in New York in July?
Yeah, with my grandson.
Oh, great. I'll be there as well. I hope we can get together.
Breakfast, maybe.
Yeah, look what I just put on just for you.
The Dave Armstrong Memorial Jacket.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you'd appreciate it.
I do. Look. Nobody out there has any fucking idea why this is as funny as it is, and I don't care. I need to share jokes with the world. I'm laughing. It's I am a little verklempt. It's good.
I broke it out just for you.
I feel seen.
All right, Howard. How about your most unhinged story in the industry?
Yes, give us something. Like, we've heard all sorts of things from fishing for people using Darkseid's hand with a candy bar in it.
Dark side.
Sorry, it's Dark Side.
Play on words.
Right
Dark
there in the
side. Dark side. It's like
I
not
knew I was going to get it.
fanzine, fanzine. What? I don't know what I don't know what contextually speaking unhinged means. I don't know what that means.
Zany,
I don't. I
wacky,
really don't. I mean,
unusual
okay,
shenanigans.
okay, all right, I've got it. Okay, I'm 23 years old, maybe 24. Okay, and I'm sitting in Jack Abel's office at Continuity. Okay, and I never worked at Continuity, but I hung out there because it was a place to hang around because I lived in the boroughs. I lived in Queens, and I would wait for the rush hour to be over. And I met Jack some years earlier in my first job working for Wallace Wood, where Jack and Sid Shores rented space from Woody. And within a day, I realized that Jack spent most of his day fucking with Sid Shores. And within a day of that, Jack realized that in me, he had a henchman. The two of us spent 6 months fucking with Sid Shores. Just the worst, like high school, just high school. Okay. So here I am. This is a couple of years later. I'm sitting behind Jack. Jack and I are chatting. And one of our colleagues, and I won't name him, I will not name him because he hates me enough as it is. And he's a difficult figure. Stuck his head in the door and said, "Where are your people from?" To me. No. Hello, no. Where are your people from? Very ethnocentric. And I said, without any hesitation, I said, "We are Swedish Jews." And I did 10 minutes, basically about we changed our name. We shortened our name from Chaykin home. And we built, from our traditional canton. And I plumbed whatever I could remember about Sweden. And I built it up, just went on and on and on. And he was buying it because, unlike this MOOC that I spent the past 36 hours dealing with, I have enormous conviction. I'm convincing. Okay. And he was buying every word because I didn't laugh. But then he looked over to Jack. Jack was wearing his usual Sansa slacks and his short Banlon short sleeve shirt and a clip-on tie, with a little tea towel on his lap. And he was clutching the rims, the edges of his drawing table to avoid laughing because he was having too good a time enjoying the story. Now, that colleague didn't speak to me for 5 years. And there were 5 good years. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
What's that?
Absolutely.
Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And
but I want to know. But I want to know the colleague's name.
No, he hates me enough as it is. I mean, he may hate me. I mean, he occasionally. Some years later, I was at Heroes. I mean, I'd not last year when you and I were at Heroes last year. That was the first time I'd been there since 19 years.
Yeah,
the last time I'd been there. Yeah, the last time I'd been there, I'd spent the entire weekend cock blocking Erwin Hazen. Just because Erwin back then, Erwin looked like a schmoo, and he was drunk the entire show, and he was desperately trying to get into the pants of this woman, and it wasn't going to happen. But I just figured, what the fuck, I might cock block him anyway, so I did. At that show, I ran into this colleague at the gym back when I cared about such things. And I said, "Hey, who you fucking? Hey, who you fucking?" And he took enormous offense at my tone. And that, of course, was like a red flag in front of a bull. I mean, I pushed a button. Let's keep this going. Just keep this going. All right, And I just wouldn't let it go. And I was truly horrible. Okay. And ultimately, he became enraged with me. "How would you feel if I talked?" I said, "My wife can handle herself. She doesn't need any protection from me." All right. So leave the gym, go to breakfast, sit down at my table, which I'm sharing with Tommy Lee Edwards and the late great John Paul Leon. Mm. And I tell them about this, and they suddenly, out of nowhere, this colleague steams up. I mean, just you could see the Hanna-Barbera legs running in a circle around it. He was just in that kind of mood. And he said, "I want you to know that I have embraced Jesus Christ in my life as my personal savior, and I will never be spoken to in that tone again."
Oh.
The two boys lost their shit so hard. Tommy Lee and John Paul were just berserk laughing. I, of course, leaped to my feet, ran outside to the quiet space, called Walter immediately. Because you got to, and I said, Walter, did you know that is now a born again Christian? And just, that was it. So.
And I'll bet it didn't help that they were laughing so hard. It didn't help with your colleagues.
No. I mean, back in the day, when I was in my early 20s, we were all stoners. We all read the same things. We all looked at the same things. We all saw the same movies. And the only guy who didn't get high was Walter.
I was guessing that. Yep.
I think Walter's had a half a dozen beers and a pina colada in the time that I've known him. I think he occasionally has a beer now. What's that?
I've never seen it.
I mean, I haven't. This January I'll be 34 years sober, and so I wasn't. I mean, for 25 years I was always high. I mean, just all the time, and it was good. I had a great time, and then it stopped being good. But I'm trying to think what and anything I can say that would not hurt other people's feelings too much by not naming names. I really don't know.
Well, Howard, what are you working on these days?
Well, like I said, I just finished a job in collaboration with one of our colleagues for the Board of Education in New York City and the Tanner Museum about the Jewish immigrant experience. That was incredibly fun to do. It was just I love doing research. I love acting on research. I love that observed reality stuff. And one of the things in researching this, I went into it assuming that we'd have to build a lot of models. So I discovered that this was the first wave of heavily photographically recorded time in the States, that cameras had become actually usable appliances as opposed to portraiture. So that there's shitloads of photographic reference of this. And to a certain extent, the job dismantles the sentimentality of Fiddler on the Roof. I mean, Terry and I, you and I have talked about this, that most recent production of Fiddler on the Roof that Bart Sher directed with Danny Burstein was the first production of the show that did not make me want to punch it in the face. Because he managed to create linkage between Danny's portrayal of Fedya and a modern world that just knocked me out. Just destroyed. So wait a minute.
We do have a nice little comment here from Sean Chen.
It's true. It's true.
He says, I told Howard I was from Forest Hills, and the only thing he said about that was that's where one would go to hook up with cheating wives back in the day.
Es la verdad. Es la verdad.
Or to get shot.
I was young.
Or to get shot by Son of Sam. That was the other reason.
No, he came to the city to work the room. But I mean, I went from being fuckable to an unmade bed. It worked out perfectly. I looked like back then I looked like the Jewish Robert Downey Jr. And now I look like Ed Asner doing a one-man show as an unmade bed from beyond the grave.
I mean, this might be a good time for me to do this. I'm going to interrupt for just a moment for a quick commercial break. Howard, you probably have heard a little bit about it, and I'm going to share this with the audience. I'm going to do this. Heroes Be Damned. Terry and Vince Sinico have been working hard on this. Kickstarter is live. You guys should go check it out. Howard, have you heard anything about Heroes Be Damned yet?
I have not. Because the whole crowdfunding process is something that makes my head explode. I've done one and I hated it so much I'll never do it again. Wow, you're making a fortune off of this, Terry. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, I'm raking it in.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look. I mean, you're a thousandaire.
Yeah. I'm only the editor on this, Howard, and I came in.
Okay.
He had this issue completed already, so I made a couple of suggestions, and that's it. All the credit goes to Vince Sinico for this.
But credit goes to Vince Sinico for acknowledging and recognizing the fact that he has an editor and needs an editor.
Yeah, I'll give him that. Yep.
I mean, look, we work in a business where all these people doing these books without even bothering with accepting the fact that an editor is a vital part of the job. It's really important. I mean, I cannot emphasize that enough. And I constantly get into arguments with people who think that they don't need editors. Then you read their copy and you wonder why. Yeah.
Even as an editor, I wanted other eyes on my work and material because I just know. And then as a writer, you know that there are things you don't put on the page because they're in your head, and
Right.
you skip it because you know how you got from this scene to this scene, and then you just almost forget to put it on the page. You need outside eyes. You always do.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the guy who edits my stuff is an executive in an entirely other business who really takes advantage of the fact that I've given him an opportunity to act on his control issues. And every idea he has, 98%, every idea he has cost me time and money, but 99% of those ideas are worth acting on. And that's
right.
That's you know. Look, I've been lucky enough to work with some of the best editors in the business, and I include Axel Alonso and Joey Cavalieri.
Yeah.
Both,
and I don't know Axel, but Joey's a great editor.
Well, Axel was trained by Lou Stathis. Stathis was a guy who died so fucking young. Stathis is the real secret influence behind Vertigo, and even to a certain extent, heavy metal.
Really? Real?
Yes.
Wow.
I was having dinner with him, my then wife and I. And he said, you two are the darkest people I've ever known in my life. And we both cracked up. I said, but Lou, we feel the same way about you.
Oh, that's sweet.
Lou was Shelley Roberg's main squeeze back then, before she became Shelley Bond. So Lou is one of those Lou is that secret influence, like Thomas Ince, in movies, that sort of thing,
Yeah, I'm really stoked about this project that we're working on and being able to interact and work with Terry and Vince, especially being on the 24/7 Comics team. So Heroes Be Damned, I'm very fresh to the comic book scene, and I've read through all 3 issues of this, and I'm very excited to see issues 4 through 6 in the future. Because this has been really fun, like seeing an anti-hero story and all sorts of things. So I have to plug this though for our audience watching. You guys should go back this Kickstarter. It's really cool. All sorts of different tiers. You can just get the 3 issues, you can get the digital edition plus the physical edition, all the way up to like the commissioned pieces by Vince. The add-ons are in my opinion, some of the coolest bits that you can get from our standardized metal cards, so our collector's metal cards, and the holographic foil and the metal cover by Bill Sienkiewicz. We also Sienkiewicz. Oh my gosh, my day is awesome. And we have a card game, the Heroes Be Damned card game. So if you want to play Heroes Be Damned at home, please do so, because it's going to be pretty awesome. All the artwork by Vince Sinico. The link is in all the bios and everything. So if you haven't backed it yet, please do it. We're almost to 200 backers. And that's my little commercial plug.
That's great.
And I took advantage of the commercial to take a leak.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Howard, if you're interested, I'll send you the digital links for the first few issues of this. I'd be curious as to what you think.
I'm sure I'll hate it, but sure.
I will send it to you.
I'm sorry.
Well,
I have no affinity for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. Let's hope for the best.
I like men, women, clothes, cars, guns, and fucking. That's it. That's my. I'm not interested in super monster laser space. Shit coming out of their eyes stuff. Like not my world.
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit of that, but we'll try.
Really? Who knows?
Listen, guys, as much as I'd like to continue this, they've just warned me they're about to start jackhammering my backyard. So I
all right,
don't
Terry, am I
think,
going to see you? Am I going to see you in Baltimore?
nope, I wasn't invited to Baltimore, but hopefully I'll see you in New York next month.
All right, let's do this. Let's touch base. I've got 4 days. My grandson's with me. Let's do breakfast, okay?
I'm in.
All right.
And
Sounds good.
then we'll bring this in for a landing. Howard, what are the best ways people can find you or get in contact with you?
Huh? I'm the only social media network I use is Facebook because I'm old. I was smart enough not to get onto Blue Sky before it became a bullshit enterprise. I'm here where I am, and I'm not really that. I mean, you can contact me, but I'm not that amenable. I'm just, I have enough friends.
But you can keep up with his work that way. You can keep up with his work.
True. Well, I mean, I'm just working and I'm having a good time. I mean, I'm grateful to have the career that I've had. I take nothing for granted. So thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate you
well earned
being here.
Please.
And for everybody watching, thank you guys for tuning in and on this episode of Unhinged. Hopefully you got a little taste of somebody else's perspective in the industry. We will catch you guys later.
Thanks again.